So, everybody, Pam Hupp.
Hello, everybody. I look around this room and I see a lot of people I already know, and I'm glad to see you're here to support. I've told you a lot about what's going on with the southern border and the trip that I took, and I've kept it kind of quiet. I started out putting a lot of it on Facebook for 3 or 4 posts, realized there was just way too much information and it wasn't even possible to do it that way. So instead, I'm thankful that I have this opportunity here tonight to help you. Okay. The reason it says hashtag border crisis at the top there is because when we're talking about this, we were actually using social media and we were using that hashtag in order to kind of mix that noise. You know how it is when you can hashtag something. Also, it was hashtag border security. Both of them linked hand in hand. And tonight, I'm going to talk about where we were, which was in McAllen, Texas. But I want to introduce who was there with me. First of all, I give a big thanks to the Americans for Prosperity Foundation. And we have representation. She just walked through the door. 2 ladies here tonight that are on the list. First of all, Ashley Klingensmith, who is our state director. She's the first one on the list there. Wave and let those in the back can see. Okay. She has been a part of our county since she was actually just the Southwestern Pennsylvania representative, basically working with us, and you live in Westmoreland County. And she has a bundle of energy, and she's moved right through the hierarchy to the point where she's at the state, and she makes a big impact, not only at the state level, but actually at the federal level as well. And I'm pleased to have her be a part of my life, actually. And she's got a microphone, so if you want to say something for a minute, go ahead, since we have the honor of having her with us.
No, not at all. It was so neat to have the opportunity as a critical U.S. Senate state next year to be able to bring some folks, to the border, and as a state chapter have the opportunity to go down. And Pam we had a finite number of places, and so we took some members of the media and then an activist. And when we thought about our kind of statewide bench of folks, Pam was like number 1 on the list for all of us. So you just had an incredible ally in the liberty movement in Pam. And so I can't wait to hear about your impressions. I don't think I ever debriefed with you, but it was really eye-opening. And I think a lot of what we'll talk about tonight is that this issue has so many intricacies, and being there makes you realize there is no one-size-fits-all solution. It is so darn nuanced, and so it really was just such an honor for you to be there. So thank you for having us. And we have some really good leave-behinds. We couldn't print out a ton, but if anyone wants us to email you a digital copy, you just come on over and holler, and we'll shoot it to you straight away.
And there's also another lady in the room as well. This is Mary Beth Cerrucci. And Mary Beth is the third one on there. She's a coalition director. She's out with the Monroeville Plum area and instrumental in our area, but I see you everywhere across the United States as well. And you used to work for a politician's office. Tell us a little bit about what you did and what you do now.
So yeah, I actually started my political career at the school board. I'll be wrapping up my 8th year as a school board director. And then I worked for 2 state representatives in the Pennsylvania House, Representative Eli Vankovich and Representative Bob Brooks. And then Bob retired when they did the redistricting, and Ashley Klingensmith and I had known each other just through, political activities and things. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't know, what?" About a month later, I was on board with AFP. And it's a great organization. Super happy to be there, but we are all over the place. I mean, this year I have the state of Pennsylvania, but we've also been in Florida. We've been at the border. I've been in West Virginia. I've been in Ohio. We're just all over, fighting for freedom and fighting for limited government. So we're happy to have you as a partner.
With her and Pete Linko, who is the director of Grassroots, and some of you might remember Pete from the book club that I had, and Emily Green, definitely a lot of you remember Emily Green from the book club, 5,000 Year League, because the 5,000 Year League has been sponsored by AFP as well. And that's, I guess, why you gave me that title, activist, but let me tell you, I don't see that in me. And it startled me when they pointed to me as being an activist and told me to come with them. So I'm thankful for that. It's been many years. But they are a powerhouse of information and movement and interaction with both our state and federal representation, okay, our legislatures. They just, they don't sit still. And they gave me the willies when I was traveling with them because of that. Along with that came R.J. Harris from iHeartRadio. He has a morning radio broadcast. A very, very informative man. And Christine Flowers, she amazed me. I first heard of her as a columnist and writer, but in fact, she's also an immigration attorney. And she speaks fluent Spanish, which came in handy while we were down there. So that's what we're doing. We were one of 8 different states that were represented at that time. At least that's the number I could count from everybody that was there. They all had a team about the same size as ours, sort of made up the same way. Some of them had legislators with them as well. And when we were there, they were there for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and on Wednesday came in a whole other team from other states. So this was a week-long effort, 2 stages, trying to get as many people from Americans for Prosperity in the states that they represented there to see what's going on at the border and ask questions and find information. And the biggest thing is doing what I'm doing right now, bringing it back in the best way we can. So even though they focus on all those other topics, you can see immigration was the topic for that week. I want to give you some background on the border itself before I talk about some of the actual personal interactions that we had while we were down there and the things that we learned, not just myself but them. And I hope that if there's anything you want to add, you pipe in. But the border itself is broken up into sectors, and there are 9 different sectors. We hear about some of them in the news, but we don't really know where and what they are. And I want to tell you something. I should be up front. All of these slides, along with the notes that I have with them that you don't see, my magic notes, are going to be shared with you. After this, Joel will pass them out. So if you don't really take a whole bunch of notes, I'm very thorough, and I'll make sure that you actually get them. But it's kind of hard from that distance to see. But if you start with here, there's San Diego, El Centro, Yuma, Tulsa, El Paso, Marfa, Del Rio, Laredo, excuse me, and then where we were. And you can see how we are the farthest tip down there in the Rio Grande Valley sector. These sectors don't just include one state. If you look at the Marfa one, it actually goes up into Oklahoma. If you look at the Yuma, it goes into Nevada. So they cover a lot of territory. So when they say they have border patrol, those agents are to cover those areas. Okay, and that's a lot of space. Now, last year, the Rio Grande Valley was actually the most busy when it came to crossing, both legal and illegal. Okay, this year they're not. The numbers are down a little bit. I think they're like the 3rd highest right now. But last year they were. For a long time, Yuma was. And while we were there, we actually got to interact with a deputy chief that was at Yuma. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what we learned from him. But there are over 175 different countries that try to cross our borders. I'm going to break a little bit of that down as we go here tonight, but I'll show you some graphs as to what's happening, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley, the RGV sector. Okay. Now this is more where we actually were. I talked about going to McAllen. McAllen actually makes up Mission and Hidalgo, Texas. And the circled areas, first of all, I don't know if you can even follow. This little wiggly line here is the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande is actually the border between Mexico and Texas. The middle of the river itself is what they consider the actual border. So try building a border wall on a river. Doesn't happen to, right? So envision that first of all. Second of all, they have what they call ports of entry. Some of them are actually bridges, and some of them are actually more of a port further inland. So we were near what's called the McAllen Hidalgo International Bridge. When I say near, we never got to go to these ports. We drove by them, we could see them, but we didn't actually go to them. And then there was another one here, and I think it says Pharr, P-H-A-R-R, Reynosa. Reynosa is actually a city in Mexico. So they were connecting between the Reynosa area and the Texas area, okay? These two here are very highly used. Matter of fact, the one in McAllen is more, I'd say the major one there. But the reason this one has been singled out is it's the biggest port we have for commercial activity. Trucks, over 6,000 commercial trucks cross there each day. Can you imagine that? Okay, it's big for avocados, berries, gasoline, wire, things like that. Over $300 billion worth of materials travel through there in a year's time. So it's pretty big. There's another one up here, another circle zone border one. That one is called, and I'll probably botch it up, Anzaraldus. Anzaraldus, we went to a park, and there was actually the Anzaraldus International Bridge was really close to there. That one is going to be souped up. It's being remodeled, let's say that. Right now, people come in with cars and they go back and forth like walking. Trucks are only leaving Texas going over empty into Mexico there. They want it by next year to actually be having 2,000 trucks going across. So now, if you think about that, there's a lot of commercial activity. What we saw there were a lot of distribution centers, a lot of businesses that have their headquarters in this area, and that's where a lot of commercial stuff was happening. So you see, I think they mentioned some of the Amazon distribution, some of the other bigger companies that are in that area. We saw a lot of warehouses. We saw a lot of semis. We didn't see a lot of border patrols. We noticed that. Okay. The squared in places are where we actually stopped. We stopped at a water authority. It's actually number 3. They have 3 pipe places. So we were here. We were, let me see, this one right here is this is the park, the Anzaraldus Mission Park. This was where we actually had a unique situation where the Rio Grande actually looped out, and we were south of Mexico. We were looking at the Rio Grande. We could see Mexican land right there. You could swim if you were a good swimmer right across, but that was a unique situation there. We also stopped at a park up here. That was the Benson, Rio Grande Valley. We stayed there at a state park. It was actually very close to the border wall, very low border walls, but it was very deep into the land. And we had our lunch there, and we also met with the Border Patrol representative there. And finally, we're here at the missions. This was the Catholic missions, and I'll talk to you about that. So our trip in a day's time was rather long, okay? Well, in the dim light that you see, this is actually the southern border, again starting at San Diego. And these lines represent walls. There are some openings here of the border wall. And I'm talking the physical wall that you all expect, a large wall, okay? You can see it here, but if you get over by Texas, you will notice there aren't a lot of areas there that have border walls. We saw segments of it. I mean, when you're driving, they look pretty long, but there's also open areas. And there's a reason. In the area you see on the west side of the United States, that's a lot of public land, and there wasn't a lot of opposition to building the walls. So they could easily build there. But when you get into Texas, you're talking a lot of private land. You're also, I said, you don't build a wall in the middle of a river. So a lot of these walls are actually pushed back further into land, some of them as much as 12 miles. You've got people that own property on one side of the wall, and they got to get to the other side of the wall. Okay, so that causes a lot of issues there, so it's not that easy. And you'll notice when we go along, even the Border Patrol have other suggestions for some of these areas, especially if they're private, or if they're back in areas that are very hard to get to. We think that we have to build a wall everywhere, but that's not necessarily true. Whose walls are they? Everybody wants to put a label on it. That's George W. Bush's wall. That's Trump's wall. Obama has a wall. Whose walls are they, right? You can tell them apart. We were at the Water Authority, and this is a George Bush wall. It has sort of a pointed top to it, a little bit of an angle to it, but literally you could throw a rope and kind of climb over that. And the uniqueness over here at Trump's is there's this large area at the top that's flat. It's a little hard to scale it. This one here, I had a hard time finding an example, but we got to give credit. President Obama did actually build some wall. Okay, most of it was more towards the California, Arizona, that area. And so this is an example of one here that actually has a water flooding duct like here. More transparent, not as robust as the other two, But the problem with these walls are, and this is actually on purpose right here, that opening, it's on purpose. But a lot of times you're walking along and you're driving along and you'll see big sections that are open. And some of it is because they have to give access to people to get on the other side. And I'm talking about landowners. I remember I said they build it right down the middle of their land, they gotta get on the other side, they gotta leave it open. Some of it was because private people did not allow them to build it. Some of it was money was either taken away from the project or it was just not available and seemed incomplete. So you see that. Now the governor of Texas has been getting a lot of heat over the last couple months because of what he's been doing. And when we were down there at the Water Authority, we actually saw some of this razor fencing actually out along the, on the U.S. side of the Rio Grande. There was that, what do they call it? Razor wire, some other term for it.
Barbed wire.
It's not really barbed wire, it's cutting.
Concertina wire.
Yeah, that's the fancy word for it, yes. Yeah. He put that there. Also, he's been putting down the middle of the Rio Grande, right on the borderline, these flotations. And these floats are kind of unique. They have netting underneath them so somebody can't swim under them, and if you actually try to get on them, they rotate.
Wow.
And so you got to stay on one side or the other. And he's been taking a lot of heat for that, but he's trying to protect his state, right?
Late in the game.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Yeah. I want to see if there's anything else I want to show. Okay. This is comparing some of the crossings that took place and where they're taking place over the last 3 to 4 years. The first line on each one of these areas is 2020. The ones at the bottom go down to 2023 year to date, which is about July. Okay? And these are percentages of people from different places. And for those of you in the back that might not be able to read it, this is the category other. This one in orange is Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. More of the Central American population. And if you can see just graphically, I'm sure you guys can tell the difference between 2020, 21, 22, and 23. What do you see happening? There was a large number of crossings, right? Whether they were legal or illegal, right? And what's happening here is, it's policy, right? It's policy. So the changes are over time. We talk about, I think even today, who was it? Somebody here in this room told me that our vice president said the border's secure. Okay, her definition of secure is different than our definition of secure. Reason I put the map up here, I wanted to show you where some of these, Central America, there's actually a point between Colombia and Panama as the Darien Jungle Gap. Very, very dangerous. Yeah. And people have to pay some pretty good money to get through there. But if they're coming from down in South America, they have to cross that. And we're seeing some people, like Chinese, are coming through that way. They had some statistics that there was a rise in the last year or so. And people look at that and think, well, no, we're being invaded by the Chinese. But there are some geopolitical reasons why they would want to come too. There's people over there being, their religions being persecuted. They actually, they sympathize with Hong Kong. Okay, that's another one that was given to us. Also, they don't believe in the policies they have with the COVID. Okay, so they're making the journey, but they're making a very difficult journey if they come into South America and come up. Now, I will say, there was also pointed out to us that within a 3 to 4 week time frame, this summer, I should say more summer, spring, there was a surge of about an extra 7% of Chinese coming in, and they were an unusual demographic. They were all singles, single men, single women, no ties to family, and they were coming across through the legal port. They weren't coming along illegally. Okay, they're coming right through and asking for asylum. But there was a question as to why so many of that particular demographic. Why? Pardon me?
And do we know why?
Military. No, that was not even told us why, but they said that surge. Now it stopped, but it went on for about 3 or 4 weeks. So that's something to think about.
All military.
Now the other thing you want to look at is what type of crossings you're having. Single adults. You'll see the majority of them are single adults. Okay, this was in this is this year to date for 2023, okay? And this is across the entire border, okay? This is not just down where we were. This is family units that are coming across here. And this here is singles or unaccompanied minors. That means someone under the age of 18 is single or unaccompanied. When they come unaccompanied, they usually come with instructions pinned to them. They have a sponsor or someone that's usually a name and a phone number. And the only problem is that the Border Patrols and the Customs are not allowed to check out these sponsors.
Why?
Because our Congress didn't give them that authority.
Oh my God.
So if they come with the information, they have to go on and this is an honest thing. And I know some of you are putting flags up that maybe this has something to do with trafficking, okay? That comes to mind, okay? We're going to talk about how the Catholic Charities handle that kind of thing too. But you've got the family units. If someone comes in as a family unit, they do not turn them away. They don't detain them. They allow them to go through the system. Now, what we heard from the gentleman who out of the Yuma sector is that sometimes, and you've heard it too, they reuse children. And he actually had an example where I think that 3 times, 3 different Brazilian families brought the same child in. Someone and his staff happened to notice that. So those kind of things do happen too, okay? But the single adults, there's going to be some overlooking. We're going to look at some of the titles, so Title 42, Title 8, here in a few slides, explaining how that works. The one thing that we have to think about, though, when we have border crossings, the statistics are that about 2.5% of the people that cross have some kind of criminal record. And the only way we can say that is that it's a criminal record on the U.S. side. They're not able to find out what the criminal record is on the other side. And we had one of our speakers tell us that that could also be 2.5 to about 7%. So if we average what that would be, say it's 5%, they have a criminal record either on the Mexican side or on the American side, and they were averaging in the McAllen, that Rio Grande Valley, 2,000 people coming over every day. So about 100 of them could be someone with a criminal record. So it's impossible for us to know. So that's a worry that you would have, especially if you're a local, but also as they move through our system and go further. The other thing that happened while we were down there was our Supreme Court made a decision. It decided that the Homeland Security Secretary could focus only on current crossings when he wanted to prosecute. So if someone came across now and had a criminal record, then they could be turned away. But if it was someone that had already come in, maybe last year, and they found out, they weren't going to go back and go after them. It was going to be current. And part of that is the fact that they have a limited amount of, first of all, staff to go and do that between ICE and Border Patrol. Second, also judicial. They're judges. We're overwhelmed. So they had to make a choice. But that happened also while we were down there. It was a decision by the Supreme Court. So I keep talking about Border Patrol agents. They are actually part of the Customs and Border Protection that falls under the Homeland Security. They are under our Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
Traitor.
Well, I'm not sure, but Chris might have said that as well. He had the same kind of opinion. I put a name down at the bottom. Chris Clem, he was the chief patrol agent at the Yuma, Arizona sector. He just retired at the end of December. He had 27 plus years of service. And so he was very, very informative about what happens and the impact on our Border Patrol. Not only on their duties, but on their psyche and their personal side too. So I'm going to go through that a little bit with you as well. They have 3 things that they are required to do. Interdict. Interdict means they try to identify and stop crossing, okay? Illegal crossings in between ports of entry. So they prevent both people and drugs from entering our country, okay? That's an interdiction. An apprehension is if they capture someone who's actually crossing. That happens, again, between ports of entry, not at a port of entry. That's not there. They're not customs, they're Border Patrol. The final thing is they're then asked to process whomever it is they capture. Okay? They're processing them to move out of the border. They're moving them into the system with ICE. ICE is our Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They're supposed to be the ones that detain them until they have a hearing. What happens though, they don't have a way to detain them. So you've heard the stories about it, they were given a phone and they're told to come back and report and that stuff. Well, it does happen. They're supposed to report back within 30 to 60 days, and then they're supposed to get a hearing date. And the hearing dates, it's interesting, when we were down there, they said about 3 years.
Yep. The average time for a removal hearing has increased right now to 36 months. So it is incredible that it is increasing.
The weird thing was, on my way down before I hit the plane, there was actually someone in a different area interviewed, and it's probably area by area. They were up to 5 years.
Yeah.
It depends on the volume, I think, and the number of judges and places they can have these hearings at. So there's a lag time there, obviously. And the thing is, if they get the ability to be in our immigration system, they are now given the ability to work. You're given a work permit with no cost. So that's one of the benefits, if they can get past that one point. They can get there. Now, there's the term getaway. When I was down there, I was kind of, does that mean something? Okay, I saw a light shine. A getaway caught my eye, because I thought a getaway was an estimate. You know, they made it out, they kind of figured it out, they weren't sure. No, getaways are a real number. Getaways are, they have evidence that someone, footprints, something dropped. They had a sensor go off. They had someone on camera that came through an area, but they never got them. So it's a real number and not just, an estimate. So whenever we talk about getaways, they have some evidence of illegal content. Now, when they're in these different areas, you got to think about down there too. You've got urban areas, you've got rural areas, and you've got out, like in wilderness areas. They gave us statistics. If you think of someone crosses in an urban area, they can disappear within seconds or minutes. They're gone. In a building, in a car, gone. Okay? If they're in a rural area, it takes more like minutes to hours. Okay? So for someone to apprehend them, they still got to be pretty fast. They got to get there pretty quick. Okay? Out in a more wilderness area, it's going to take hours to days. Okay? So you have this urgency if you're going to try to get there. We're going to talk about some experiences we had with the water authority where the urgency doesn't happen because of the border patrols are far in between and they have to cover so much territory, it's not even impossible for them to do that. So, all right, while we were down there, this is a 7-day period. This is covering the entire border, not just the Texas area where we were at, so those 9 sectors. This will give you an idea how all of these things are broken down. They had 24,000 arrests of illegals. That means someone crossing the border illegally, not through the port of entry. They had 5,000 others that were sent back to wherever they came from, probably from a Title VIII law. By that time, Title 42 was over. They had 6,000 of them sent to ICE for processing. We already told you ICE doesn't get to process and detain. They detain some of them if they feel that they need to, but most of them, about 50% or more, get released into the interior. But those that didn't even go to ICE, they actually had 12,000 of them released right into the United States. Probably a lot of family members, someone who had a sponsor, someone who could move on through the process. They estimated in that same 7 days there was 5,000, well actually 5,700, 5.7 thousand getaways. Okay? And at the same time, I wanted to let you know, these people are also in dangerous situations. 17 of their border patrol agents were assaulted in some way, trying to save us from this. So 52,000 people over that border in 7 days. The strain on the staff, also the strain on their money. It'll cost a border sector over $500,000 a day to service these people coming through. That's a lot. Okay? I think that, I'll let you just look at that later. That's got to do sort of a repeat of what we had before, but this is in a 7-day period. Okay? What else was happening while we were down there? These were headlines. How much fentanyl was coming across the borders. How much of it was coming in June. Okay, Border Protection seized over 21,000 pounds of illicit fentanyl in the month of June. That's the entire border. Okay, I'll tell you right now, Arizona is a hotbed for fentanyl. They do the most. They have an interesting thing out there. You guys remember Snapchat, right? Well, Snapchat is used in the Tucson area especially. They have actually documented this. They will go after 15 to 17-year-olds in Snapchat, trying to get them to be the ones that will carry the drugs from the border into the sellers, right? They tell them not to stop for the police, and they said the result of that is the fact that they have more deaths, they have accidents, they're hurting and killing themselves, and they're killing other people because of that. So they're preying on the need for money in teenagers, and they're using that Snapchat, which if you know anything about Snapchat, they can make a message that disappears, right? There's nothing to follow. So, but you'll see at the bottom here, that's actually a take of fentanyl, 58,000 fentanyl pills in Oregon. And we know we have fentanyl around here as well. So this is not something that just at the border, it's spreading. So the getaways, those or gotaways they call them, they're saying, we look at things and we see surges, and we get all upset about surges, right? Big trains of people coming through. But what you should be really worried about is the getaways. A lot of times the people coming to the port of entry and overwhelming them, or the ones crossing in an illegal area but wanting to be taken in, are not the ones we should worry about. They're not the traffickers, they're not the drug people, it's the getaways. They probably paid for that other service. They are people that have money. They are high-end targets that want to get away. Okay? So while we're busy over here taking care of one situation, getaways can occur on another. You know, it's that sleight of hand kind of thing. So just think of that. Now, I keep mentioning Title 42 and Title 8.
Pam, can I ask a question?
Sure.
With the fentanyl, have they identified the demographic of who is bringing that in? Kind of the profile of the type of person or the...
We didn't actually go there.
nationality?
You know, we didn't go into that. I mean, there's that assumption that it's somehow coming through China, but we don't. That wasn't part of our meetings. We didn't talk to anybody about that. So no, nothing specific. Sorry. I did have only a day and a half there, so it's limited. All right, I wanted to identify Title 8 and Title 42, because Title 42 just got abolished, and I know us here in the North, we thought that was probably the worst thing they could have done, right? I'm going to explain to you that it probably wasn't. Okay, open my eyes up while we were down there. What did that really mean? When you had Title 8, it's the original enforcement, okay? It's an apprehension or an inadmissible process. Okay, inadmissible means they come to the ports, they're wanting to seek entry in, but they don't qualify. And then they're sent back, okay? Or they are actually withdrawing their application and return on their own, okay? The other under Title 8 is apprehensions. That's someone where they actually take them under control, they hold them for some reason, whether or not they end up with an arrest, but they're not here lawfully. They're someone who came in illegally, okay? And we'll make a determining factor whether or not they stay or whether they go back. So that's Title 8. Title 42 was put in around the time with the COVID. It has to do more with whether or not they could be bringing something in here that would make us sick, health issue. Okay, so they would look at some of the countries that were coming in, and if they had a high COVID rate, they would send them back. That sounds all good and well, except for one thing. If they were expelled with Title 42, they had no record of being here. So they got to leave, go back to another country, the one that they just came through, or their country of origin, no record that they had been here, and it gave them the option to turn around the very next day and come right back. Okay, so they would be hip-hopping across the border until they could get through, right? And when doing that, that accounted for about 25% of the apprehensions and prosecutions that we had to go through. Is someone coming back and forth, back and forth. So if you had 1,000 people coming over and 250 of them were repeaters, you're bogging down our system, right? So what we needed to do was give them that they go back and they have consequences. And that's what happened. When Title 42 ended, it reverted back to Title 8. And the interesting thing is if they try to attempt to cross the border, they cannot come back for 5 years. So they better come ready to figure out a way to get approved and get through. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to boomerang. The history is there, they're known, And that's the difference. So that's one of the things that, it's better that Title 42 disappeared, actually.
What's the consequences of them violating Title VIII?
They can't come back for 5 years.
What if they do?
Well, then they're just sent back immediately. They're part of the system. They have a
And just
history.
keep coming back?
Well, they know not to do that. I mean, they're not
Or
gonna,
else what?
Really, I mean, it's
What happens to them if they are apprehended 17 times under Title VIII?
well, I don't know if there's a limit on how many times they can be apprehended and then they detain them. I don't know. I mean, there's a level of history now. They're not because of Title 42, they have no history.
That doesn't seem like.
Except for somebody who's bright and actually sees them and knows, I've seen you before.
It doesn't seem like much of a deterrent, that's all.
I'm not gonna say that's the only deterrent there is. I'm just saying 42 was definitely not a deterrent. It was actually a help. Let's put it that way. Yeah. These are the kind of things we want to talk to our legislators about, our senators and and ask them what do they think. Because a lot of the things you're gonna find out, it's their laws. The loopholes are their laws. So I'm with you. I don't know the answer to that. I only spend so much time here. I want to bring this to your attention, and I would suggest that we have that conversation. Thanks for bringing it up.
One of the major problems is they have no identifications. They come back and forth 40 times. They come back on a different name. Whereas one of the fathers will have their children. They have no idea when they were born. And there's smaller statutes for having 18 or 25-year-olds coming over. It's 10 and 11-year-olds.
I think
We have no control.
part of the solutions is out there storing more biometrics, more ways to identify them other than just a card or a name. That we need to have something that we can actually refer to. So it could be DNA sample, it could be something. Close the border, yeah. We're going to talk about that. Okay, so here's what happened. This is the impact over 2020, 2023. And I'm sorry, it's not a graph, but it's data. Okay, 2023 year to date. You got to remember though, Title 42 ended in May, so the figures are there at a little over 500,000 people, and then it stopped. Okay, they reverted now. You'll see the numbers are getting higher under Title 8. Excuse me, I keep calling it Title 8 because they reverted to Title 8. These are people that are on the southern border that have come in and they are put through, they're illegal and they're going through these processes, okay? So the numbers are different. Now, this is the part where I get a little bit more of the story to it. We met certain people along our way. I told you a lot about the Border Patrol, but I didn't get to tell you, that's one of the gentlemen that we met, okay? Clem, his name's Chris Clem. But this is another one. This is the first one we met. His name's Othel Brand. And I had a misinterpretation at first when I went down there. He actually is the president of the Hidalgo County Water Improvement District. My first thought was, this is water for drinking. And then I did a little bit of research on what it is. This is actually irrigation. They have a lot of agriculture down there. And this is water coming out of the Rio Grande that is being used for irrigation. And then we were at the pump house number 3. Like I said, there were 2 others. They've been around for over 100 years. This one here does about 13 miles. No, I think it's 10 miles. What do we have up there? 10 square miles in Hidalgo, and thank you, and McAllen. And what they do is they're right there on the Rio Grande, and they're having interactions with these crossings. And he observed over his years that there was no border patrol around, and he kind of had a conversation with them, and he found out that there was around 13 miles of the Rio Grande that they did not have access to. So he got a bright idea. He learned how to build a boat launch. So right there, he put a boat launch in so that they can actually put a boat in and they can actually be on the Rio Grande and they can apprehend when needed. And he also gave us a little joke where he told us he learned twice. He did it twice, right? First time he did it, he screwed up and he learned how to do it, and they put it in right the second time. Okay? The other thing then he found out, floodlights. Because not only did he make it a port for them to get in, but also that became a crossing area. And I'll show you in the next slide how that occurred. But floodlights and putting cameras up on poles so that when a crossing occurred, they would have evidence. Okay? So he put a lot of effort in a non-federal agency to help support a federal agency, the Border Patrol. They were still having regular interactions though, and there was a couple other things he shared with us. One was what they call the river sign language. His men would come in the morning, and that could be women too, I don't know if he has women staff or not, I don't want to be prejudiced. You just said men? Okay, they come in the morning, and I gotta put this down to show you, but they would see maybe a group of people crossing, and they'd be pulling in, and you get this. You know? They figured that out was, could you just kind of leave us alone? And they would get in their cars, they go to McDonald's, have a cup of coffee, wait about 30 minutes, and they come back. These people did not want to have a confrontation. They were not, a lot of times they weren't even the cartel, that's the word I'm thinking. Got too many words in my head. They weren't the cartel that were there, because the cartel might only go to the middle of the river and then let them continue the rest of the way. But either way, they weren't trying to have any confrontation on the U.S. side. I mean, that brought attention to them, unwanted attention. He even had times where they would shoot around his staff. We found out they weren't trying to shoot the staff, they were trying to shoot around the staff, kind of scare them away, right? So they would leave. Well, they also would then call the Border Patrol and let them know what was happening. Because their job is to bring water in for irrigation. Their job is not to apprehend illegals. But they were right there having these interactions, okay? So they were supporting each other. But the problem again is the Border Patrol may not be close. They're gonna cross. It's an urban area, a little bit rural depending on where they're at. They're gonna disappear. But they had cameras now. They had floodlights, and they had all that. There was a couple other things that happened. He started allowing them to have personal protection, meaning they got to conceal carry. He trained them, trained their family if they wanted it. There was observations of him, actually, of what he wore, what he drove, and there was a mimicking going on at one point where they came in and picked up something. The staff thought it was him. They rode the same car that he rode. He likes to wear white shirts, it's pretty easy for him. And he actually did the white shirts. And that kind of startled them, that they were starting to mimic. So these are all things they had to keep aware of. His history, though, he had been there, raised in that area. He told us what it was like before all of this. How, you used to have families that went down to the river and they actually spent their weekends there and enjoyed it. Nobody does that anymore. He talked about, his dad was the mayor at one point. They also had farms. Farms as far back as 150 miles still don't feel comfortable being in their farms. And I'll even explain that a little bit more as I go along. You can see there's Mary Beth up there. This is Ogle. This is Chris, the Border Patrol agent, right there. Now, just to give you an idea, this is the launch. This is me standing on the launch with people here. This is a crossing area across the Rio Grande from us, which is located right about here. So that's all the further they would have to go in order to get across in that area. The Rio Grande also is not usually that dense with water. It's that way because of the irrigation that they do. They used to dry up more, but it doesn't anymore because of they need the water supply. So things have changed there. The other thing they told us about was you look at drugs or human. What do you want to do? Okay? If you were to be carrying drugs back and forth across the border, that is a little bit harder to do because you're transferring the drugs, you got to get them to the other side, you got to sell them, and then you got to get the money back to Mexico. And the cartels found out that human trafficking is easier. They pay on the Mexican side, and they carry them over, and then they're done. The money stays over there. So in this area, they're doing more of the people moving, okay, than they are there, right?
Who's paying? Who's paying for the human trafficking?
Well, the trafficking, that depends. I said I'm not, this is an assumption. This is
No,
not
I
what
don't
we
know
heard.
if they're
Okay?
paying to have, but
No, I mean, I'm gonna put 2 and 2 together myself. Like I said, those getaways, I think sometimes the getaway people are trying to pay for some of the other stuff. But these people also put together their own money. They get their own money to go across too. I mean, and I don't know what their deals are. I don't know how much they pay. I mean, you might pay a little bit and you don't get as much service as you get the other way. Maybe you have to provide other things.
these are large sums of money though, correct?
I have no idea. Never knew how much the money transfers.
Some can be, 10,000. quite a bit of money.
We never talked
To
money
get them
when we were
across.
there. Yeah. Well, even that Darien Gap area, they have to pay. They might have to pay incrementally as they go, you know. We never talked money. We didn't talk to any, well, that's not true. Ashley and I did talk to one young lady and her story, which I'm going to talk about later, and a few others that I was having a conversation, but that was within the Catholic Charities where you're talking to families. So I don't know about some of the others.
Well, we're discussing demographics on certain things, and certain demographics have the money to be able to do this,
Yeah.
right?
I've watched other things where some of these crossings are actually people that have money, their kids, and they're crossing, you know, they pay for it. It's not, and there's speculation everywhere. You can get, how do I say, you can go down the rabbit hole a lot. And as soon as you start talking about this, you start seeing every article, every news thing, every documentary there is. And you gotta be careful. Like, when we were there though, we didn't have any problems with it. We didn't talk about it. Sorry on that. Okay. Asylum requests. Whoops, too far. But it, how do I get it to just bring my? There we go. Okay. We in the U.S. have no obligation to accept anyone who says they want to come here for an asylum. However, we do have this one 1980 Refugee Act, and it says that anyone who claims it has a right to be heard. And the little subtitle to that is, you could be an illegal or illegal crossing, and if you claim that you want asylum, you have the right to be heard. Okay? So, and I'm sure that people have been schooled on how to do that. To be eligible, though, you have to meet certain criteria. Okay? In order to go through a credible fear hearing, this is research I did once I got back because things were mentioned down there and I wanted to understand this specifically. You have to be found to be fleeing persecution. It has to be based on either your race, your religion, your political views, your nationality, or be a member of some particular, like, protected social group. Okay? It doesn't mean I'm fleeing violence, I'm fleeing extortion, I'm fleeing poverty, I'm trying to get away from, they're fighting on this side of my country, and I'm trying to remove myself from it. Those aren't qualifiers. And that's something I learned from the immigration lawyer that was with us, and she works on this a lot. You have to be very careful. So not everybody qualifies for asylum. And here's the other kicker. They don't always go to the Border Patrol and say, I'm here claiming asylum. They come in and they go towards the judge. So what this does is it also jams up our legal system. Once they get in front of the judges, they will make a claim that they want asylum. And then they have to start a whole other process. So false claims are the problem. If they're a false claim and they don't fall into those categories, it is something they still have to go through. Right? If you get a notice to appear or in an immigration system, then you get to work. You get a permit to work for free. Somebody said, how do they get enticed to come over here? Some of the things I found out is that a lot of times they're told that it doesn't take much. $15, you can get a permit. You can work in the United States. You'll be fine. And they'll come and they'll find out that's not true. Actually, to get a permit, it's about $350 and you have to wait 150 days. But if they can get themselves into our immigration system, they know the right things to say, then they immediately are given one for free. Okay, and they get immigration benefits. And that's where we kind of get worried because we're spending our money on immigration that might not necessarily be where we want our money to go. Healthcare, school, huh? Yeah. Assist with housing, things like that.
So people come in legally, or let's say through the port, have to pay to get all that stuff, but if they get themselves in the system, they're given it free.
No, if they come through a port and they can get into our immigration system, they can get this.
So who has to pay the $350 to get a permit?
Someone who comes in illegally trying, actually not true. The regular process, like if you came through, and what do they call them? Not green cards,
A visa.
Yeah, a visa. And you try to get a permit to work in the United States. The real process is $350 and 150 days to wait. That's what it is. That's someone like, think of students that come in to work, or not to work, to study here, or someone who comes in to work here. They're not going to become a U.S. citizen, but they're coming through, then they want to be able to work here. We had one gentleman in our church, David. He's married to a woman here, he's becoming a citizen, but he had to wait to get his permission to get a job. That was pretty tough on them. waiting for that. He's doing it the legal way, you know? Yeah.
You need to go on a lake house, a lot of girls come over and work. You need to go on a lake, filming.
Yeah, a lot of camps, summer camps, bring international students over to work. That might be an example too. Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of visas, a lot of our, what we would consider unlawful that are still staying here in the United States are people with visas that just don't leave. They say about 15% is the statistics. Again, this is not something I learned down there. This is something I looked up, so you guys, I figured you're going to ask these questions. Okay. Catholic charities. If I say that to some people, they get up in arms. They're hollering that they're, what was that?
They're evil.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Okay. Catholic charities, what we experienced down there was a little different. And I want to kind of drag you through the details of what we saw in McAllen. There is, since 1992, there's been the Catholic Charities Respite Center in the middle of McAllen. It's actually right across from the bus, like we are right here. Okay? And they would find that there would be immigrants, legal, whatever, they're in this immigration system now, waiting there to go somewhere, and they would support them. So they they created this service. And since 1992, they have helped families, only coming through the actual port of entry, meaning they're going through and declaring they're not crossing illegally. Okay, and they have to be a family unit. They've had over 400,000 of them in all those years. The families must have a sponsor. That's usually a name and an address. The sponsor is someone that they'll contact, and they have agreed to pay for their tickets to get to the sponsor's location. Okay. Now, if they call someone and they didn't know they had agreed to be a sponsor, or they decide they don't want to be a sponsor, then the Catholic Charities will look within their own charities and they'll find somebody that will do it for them. The sponsor brings them in, supports them until they are able to be independent. Now, there is where I don't call it evil, but what I think is that the sponsors can't be vetted. Just like they can't do it with customs, they don't vet these sponsors. We don't know whether it's something illegal going on or whether it's something legal. We don't know. The young lady that we met from Guatemala, she was young. She had a 7-year-old daughter. Her name was Bonnie. The mother was Jolynn. She said her sponsor was her grandfather in New York. She was coming from Guatemala. We had an interpreter talking to her. We were trying to figure out all the questions you all had. Like, how did she know to come to the United States? What enticed her to make this journey? It's pretty rough. She would only go so far back, remember? She would tell us how it was in her village, they kind of let them know that it was going to happen. She took a hike for like 3 days, then had a bus ride, never talked about how long the bus ride was, and then they dropped her off about an hour from the border, and she walked to the border crossing. That's all the detail we could get. Meanwhile, we know she had to probably pay for her daughter, that she probably, it was longer than she was willing to tell us, or even details that she was willing to tell us. And my mind was going, is there really a grandfather in New York? You know, she's a young lady, probably I would put her in her late 20s maybe, if it was that. Ashley and I were talking to her.
I didn't know that was really her daughter.
That's another thing too. Although there did seem to be a relationship between them when they were right there beside each other. It wasn't like the daughter was hiding, stuff. She said she was coming here so her daughter could get an education in the United States. All questions and flags come up, but they cannot confirm that stuff. Yes.
And it wasn't really that, it was the Catholic Charities, it was a Methodist church. She had my 2 daughters that were praying, and they got them to Germany. They got them to Germany, and then from Germany they got them to New York, and the people that agreed to sponsor them brought them, they got them to where they lived in Winston-Salem. But they had to stay with their family for a year, and their family was covering everything. They got the children going to school there, but I mean, there's a lot of churches doing this too. It's not just the Catholics, but there was the Methodists that saved this man and his 2 daughters, and how they had to keep going around. I
the circle to get them to point, see where they ended up. And they went to Ukraine, to Germany, to New York, and it's insane.
Yeah, it's a long journey.
It was about 3 different spots.
Yep. It is, there's not just Catholic Charities is who we visited. That's not all that's down there. Okay, so what they provide is they have medicine there, they provide food, they provide clothes, and they provide hygiene. And we asked, how did people in Mexico side know to come to them, because they asked to be there. And there actually is in Reynosa another charity on the other side. So sometimes we see people crossing the border, they seem to have new clothes on and everything. They don't look like they've been on a dusty journey. I feel that some of that is that they are also given clothing, hygiene, and so forth on the other side in Mexico, told that when they cross and if they make it successfully, they're going to look for this charity as well. And that's what we can figure out. They stay there about 24 to 48 hours, and they have a shift around the clock. They have 15 people there that are workers, and some of them are from the actual church themselves, and then they have volunteers, and we work volunteers then too. We help clean up the mats, we helped with packaging some things up for them for their journey. We played with the kids. That's what Christine's doing right there. She's playing with a couple of little girls, and they were holding a Catholic Mass. So there's services there. If you feel inclined, I am also sharing with you how to give them materials. And they ask for like baby bottles, socks, shoelaces surprised us. But when they go to the border, the shoelaces are removed because they're a dangerous weapon. And so they do that. And that's part of it. For sake of moving on, I think I'm going to keep going so I can.
Real quick, does Catholic Charities get any government money?
There was a question we had down there too from the Border Patrol about what they call NGOs, non-government organizations. And they say some of them are there for money, some of them are there for service. And they, as Border Patrols, begin to understand who's there for what. And so they don't make recommendations. Now this place here gets a lot of recommendations. All right, fear. Everybody want to know about fear at the border? I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. Some statistics. First of all, the Border Patrol, their biggest fear is that when they're out there, they're maybe one person and they're out in the wilderness or they're out being called, if something happened, a trigger, someone saw something on a camera, they have to respond and respond quickly, and where's their backup? Knowing that the number of people that they have for backup is far in between. They may be the only one. That's a fear. The other one is they fear the number of gotaways. The gotaways are usually criminals that are high-value targets that have paid in order to get away. And they've paid, like I said, maybe for other things to divert you. Okay? The fact is, and I told some of you this, amazed me, that in New York City, the NYPD has 36,000 policemen. And they have 19,000 civilians that help with like traffic control and with school crossings and so forth. But if you just take that 36,000 and you look at the entire border, how many Border Patrol we have, and I just got this number the other day, because before it was 21,000, I think we lost a few. The number now is 19,357 active duty patrol. Okay? Their numbers, to cover that entire 9 sectors, is less than, there's double that for 8 million people in New York City when it comes to police. That's a small number for a large territory. So they also have mental health issues, they have hygiene issues, moral issues, DUIs, domestic suicide. These are all numbers that are rising among the ranks, and they're quitting, okay? And we have things like our government that put up that whipping allegations that they knew wasn't true, okay? The workers along the borders, they worry about their own personal and their family safety. We talked about concealed carry. They don't apprehend, they just basically get out of the way. Now they do try to help the Border Patrol do their job, but again, few people, far between. Farmers don't live at their farms. When they said 150 miles in, that people don't actually live at their farms, they go there and work, their families live in the cities. It's easier and safer in the city than it is there. Opal told us that when he was younger, they used to have what they call banditos, that the people that were crossing illegally, they put water out for them, they'd thank, they go. They never interacted. Now people show up in vehicles and tell you, we give you 10 minutes to get out of your house by, and then you leave and they take whatever they want. It's gotten more scary, more violent. Then these are people who have to live with that. Okay? And there's, again, we've lost their recreation, no water. Solutions. I have 2 of them here. I want to give you some of the solutions that came from the Border Patrol and then some that AFP have actually said too. And they kind of overlap. We think that we need to build a wall everywhere. Like I said, some places. Some places it's not worth doing that. Some places it's very hard to do it. They have other technology, like in the thicker areas where there's thicker brush, they put sensors in for ground sensor. They also use cameras in towers in open areas. And you see that there aerostat right there. When we were down there, that actual one on the right was flying over the Rio Grande. When we were at that one part, the one that looped, where we were on the northern, Mexico was north of us. So they use that for radar and they use that for observations above. Okay, some areas just don't get the access. Lighting, access roads need to be improved, air and night vision, more personnel. They actually say they're down 2,700. Okay, we had relationships with Mexico where they would detain. A few years ago that was stopped. It was working. So was the National Guard being utilized. It was working. And they're asking the people down there that are involved where they have limited resources. And this is what we see even up here in our interior. Schools, hospitals, police, others. They need to speak up if they're being impacted. I tried to get some statistics for Beaver County. It's really kind of hard to do that on short notice. But I was trying to see if our schools or our police were impacted. And if I find that out, I'll share it sometime in the future. I liked Chris Clem's thing. Tall fences, wide gates. What he meant by that, tall fences for our security, wide gates though, for people to come through. There are legal ways, and we need to actually improve our legal ways of letting people come in. Nobody even talks about migrant workers anymore, the ones that came in for the agriculture. We don't want them coming in and saying they need asylum. We want them coming in to work, and they want to go back. Okay? And that follows some of the things that Americans for Prosperity has true. Strong borders, strong U.S. Okay? Addressing the problems that we have in our immigration, we have narrowed everybody down to say they have to ask for asylum. And that's not the answer. There are other ways to come here. So if you want to work here and you want to go back, some of them want to still be Mexican citizens, but in order to make a living for their family, they're opting for this instead. We need to detect and we need to apprehend those that are not coming in here lawfully. So our border patrol needs to be increased. We accomplished them with an all and above. That all and above follows what the border said. All of those different things, using technology, using walls, using people. We need to have opportunities where outside of the U.S. you can apply. You don't have to come and overwhelm our customs and border agents. Let's do it outside of the U.S. and then they can be handled before they cross. And we need to hire more judges, more asylum officers. We're short on it. That's why we've got 3 and 5 year waits. Okay? And this last in, first out, you come in, you're out. Let's get this rapid turnaround. Let's not wait for years. And pathways for legal migration. I'm talking about that, agricultural work. We need to look at that. If you want to learn more about it, I've given you the link for the immigration topics under Americans for Prosperity, and also an organization that's in the area where we were. It was actually birthed there. It's called the Libra Initiative. And they have these kind of, in more detail, these kind of ideas. And I don't know if I have time for questions.